Right.
Yes.
Like I said, it's wild times, and many things have been turned really upside down, and even reporting, and that will lead to, we see a lot of big names leaving the news business.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. It was interesting. Chuck Todd. Now, Chuck Todd was the longtime Meet the Press guy.
Political analyst for NBC. It seemed like every election cycle he would be, the expert everybody would turn to on asking what's going to happen, in much the same way that Tim Russert used to be for NBC
Yeah,
back in the 80s, 90s, and early thousands.
it seemed like NBC recently went a different direction when they went with Christian Walker as the Meet the Press host. And again, I don't know if there was a ton of bad blood between Todd and NBC, but it seemed like there was agreement that, hey, let's move in a different direction.
Right. Chuck talked about, devoting more time to a podcast and a newsletter. So he's still going to be around the Washington, D.C. political realm, I think.
Well, and it's interesting. We're seeing more media people do that. And Jim Acosta, he recently announced plans to leave CNN. He started a Substack. He's looking at other media places. And it's kind of intriguing. I mean, we're media people. You still work with Honey Matters. I still work with a couple different places. I'm hopefully, and we'll definitely talk about once it becomes final, I'm kind of in talks with a local media company to join them. But irregardless of what I do with that, we do independent stuff. I mean, this is independent right here.
Right.
And it's intriguing to see that. And I think it can overwhelm some people, but I think it's good because in the past, man, guy, like 20, 30 years ago, if you left journalism, you left journalism. I mean, there was no way.
Right. Their doors would be shutting behind you, but that's not the case anymore.
Right, because there was
and that's thanks to I would think the internet and these fabulous innovations like the what we're on right now, Streamyard and Zoom, and we can do a podcast and just put it up on any website, it seems.
The scary thing about it, and again, and believe me, some of our podcasts and some of the stuff you and I talk about are goofy as all get out.
Right.
But I think there should be a good, what do you call it, news literacy out there where, look, on my network, we react to stuff. Sometimes we're serious. Sometimes we're a little bit more silly. I just hope people out there have a good news literacy, because the thing is,
don't take us too seriously.
Well, I'm not even talking about us. At least, like people on my network, a lot of them have done news for a while. So, but, and not to say if you've never done news, you have no business being it, but I think we've got to understand where everyone's at and why they're in it for a little bit.
I like to look at our podcast as something like, letting people peek behind the scenes of the business.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And get some off-color stories and maybe insight that we wouldn't be able to get across if we were in a traditional newspaper or television or radio news organization.
And I think that's like, even in my current talks with a news organization, I think news organizations love the fact that like people like me do podcasts. I think it's important to be clear to them, because there's some news organizations out there that says, oh, you have a podcast or you're breaking news. No, we're just reacting.
Right. Even my boss, I mean, the Trumbull County prosecutor, he likes the fact that I'm out there, that, that I'm trying to, just kind of build bridges between government and media in the area. And, this is one of the ways I'm trying to do it.
Well, it's interesting, even though I'm currently in Central Ohio, we still got a good audience from Youngstown. So it's interesting to see how that's continuing, which is a good thing. So I guess my point with it is, hey, I might be joining the media ranks before long. Who knows if you're a guy, maybe you'll end up in the media one of these days. But it's interesting that even if we're not 100% in media, we can still find ways of being in the media. And it's not just your crazy uncle yelling on the internet. Man, it's people like you and me have had tons of journalism experience too. So it's kind of neat
Well, we
to.
wish the best of luck to Chuck Todd. I know I enjoyed watching him. A lot of people seem to think that he was biased one way. You know, he was a mouthpiece for the Democrats. I saw one post say today, and good riddance for him. But you know, I thought he was very knowledgeable, and he gave us some inside information. Lots of times watching Meet the Press and the way he conducted himself, and you know, and you know, I thought he was good for journalism.
I I think Chuck Todd was good. I think back to some of the other people who have had it recently. Like I don't think David Gregory was bad when he did it. There was something about Tim Russert, and sadly, Tim Russert's no longer with us.
Yeah, when I think of Meet the Press, I think of Tim Russert because he was there during my formidable days in the media, and I kind of looked up to him as a role model. I wanted to kind of, when I covered politics, I'd look to him for some guidance.
There's a lot I like about the.
And he was from Buffalo, so that's a similar area as the Mahoning Valley, and he kind of understood that kind of politics.
Well, and there was a and Kristen Welker, the lady who currently does Meet the Press, does a really good job too. It just seemed like Russert was that personality that shines through a lot more than Gregory or Todd
right. Yeah,
Welker.
Todd had a little bit, but it looked like it was kind of reserved.
Well, you had this feel
back,
especially on election nights. I mean, there was a time where, we all should enjoy working sometime, but you could tell that Russert thoroughly enjoyed.
Oh yeah, it was in his blood, and he looked forward to these times, and he was. I just remember the 2000 election. He was just with the Florida on the little blackboard. He would put, and it would come down to that, and he was right, and he did that a few hours before Florida became a dead heat.
Well, our politics has gotten a lot more tribal and a lot more divisive.
Divisive.
Yeah, and I think back in the time of Russert, Republicans and Democrats didn't like each other, but there wasn't.
But Russert could talk to both sides, and they wouldn't be suspicious of him.
Well, and I think the challenge that Todd and Acosta have is, traditional journalism says, hey, you're right down the line. You're just reporting what happens. You might react to it, and that's it. But I think some of these guys really are at crossroads where they're sitting there and saying, look, if I don't agree with something's being said, do I just report it like nothing?
Right.
And there's been a criticism I hear when I cover local politics about you don't want to be stenographers of what's happening. So like if I'm telling you, hey guy, go cover the township trustee meeting, you can't go in there with your own biases. But then on the other hand, if somebody says a bunch of crazy stuff and you're just writing it down, are you really doing your job either?
Right.
Yeah. And I think with
you're
Trump,
not really describing everything that's going on there.
Yeah, and I think with Trump, he's been a little bit more aggressive and stuff, where I think some of these media people, and again, no media person should be biased either way. And again, we've all struggled at times, and probably even you and me included from time to time.
Oh yeah, we've had politicians we've liked and disliked, and maybe it does show through in our work.
Yeah, but and that's it's hard. It's hard to say the least.
Right.
So.